Is Goku a bad person? Is he actually a bad father? It's a pretty popular meme, definitely thanks to how he was depicted in Dragon Ball Z Abridged, but it's also a fairly easy conclusion to come to if you're a casual viewer of the series. A lot of people think Goku is a terrible father, a selfish martial artist that puts his own thrills above the safety of others, and a complete moron who barely even understands the concepts of good and evil. Of course, there's also a sizable portion of people who only watch Dragon Ball Z on Toonami, and remember Goku as this heroic paragon. So what is the truth? What is Goku's moral philosophy? To answer that, first we need to examine the common beliefs about him, then we can dissect what actually makes him tick. First, the absentee father accusations. Goku seemingly abandons Gohan for most of his childhood, leaving him in the care of his current arch-enemy Piccolo the first time he dies, then choosing not to return to Earth after Namek blows up, and finally asking not to be revived after dying in the Cell games. It seems like at every opportunity he does everything he can to not have to take care of his kid. Of course, two of these have some justification. He was dead the first time, with no way back, and needed to train for the oncoming threat of the Saiyans. And after the Cell games, he genuinely believed his presence on Earth was putting all of his loved ones in danger. But after Namek? Yeah, I can't really defend that one. He was just dicking around with his new Yardrat buddies instead of raising his son. But when he does actually get to spend time with Gohan, he seemingly does so selfishly, ignoring Gohan's personal aspirations to be a scholar and just assuming his son wants the same thing he does, to fight strong guys and get super strong. But this isn't really a critique of Goku's morality. See, it's important to understand that Goku always wanted the best for Gohan, he just didn't know what the best was. Remember, Goku grew up mostly on his own after the death of Grandpa Gohan, a feral child all alone on Mount Paozu, until Bulma eventually discovered him. He doesn't have a formal education beyond what Master Roshi taught him, and is pretty stupid, especially when it comes to social norms. He thought marriage was a type of food, and couldn't tell the difference between a man and a woman without, manually checking. And this isn't his fault, he was literally dropped on his head as a baby. Goku is pretty dumb when it comes to most things, but he's always well-meaning when it comes to his family. He grew up in a trial-by-fire environment where he had to fight to survive, something he's already fairly pre-programmed to do because of his Saiyan genetics. Of course he thinks that's how a young boy is supposed to be raised, and didn't see any issue with Gohan living that sort of childhood. Goku is a lot of things, but he's never been selfish in his role as a father. Stupid? Absolutely. But as soon as he learned and understood that Gohan didn't want the same life as him, he immediately changed his tune and respected what his son wanted. I think we can pretty definitively say that Goku isn't a bad father, but the specific moral framework that underpins his choices as a father are atypical, and that's our first hint at his actual philosophy. Moving on, there's also the issue of the Superman depiction of Goku. If you grew up watching the Funimation dub of Dragon Ball Z, you might think Goku's a straight-up superhero, a selfless champion of truth, justice, and the Z-Fighter way. Lines like, "I am the hope of the universe" from the Frieza Saga speech are ripped right out of a 1950s American comic book. But here's the thing, that's not the real Goku. The English dub, especially early on, leaned hard into making Goku a traditional Western hero, but the Japanese version and the manga tell a different story. There, Goku's not fighting for some grand ideal of justice, ever. He's fighting because he loves the challenge, wants to protect his friends, and believes in pushing himself to the limit. That Frieza Saga speech, in the Japanese version, is less about being a cosmic savior and more about standing up as a proud Saiyan who's had enough of Frieza's tyranny. It's still heroic because he's standing up against evil, but it's not because of a high-minded ideal like hope or justice. Goku just finds him detestable. This disconnect matters because it colors how we see his morality. If you think Goku adheres to a strict westernized moral code and is supposed to be a flawless, upstanding hero, some of his decisions seem straight up insane. A hero who vanquishes evil would never let Vegeta live. A caring, protective father would never give Cell a sensu bean right before he fights Gohan. And until we understand how he views the world, we can't frame these actions in any way other than crazy, evil, or both. This problem only got worse in Dragon Ball Super, by the way. I could make a whole separate video about how poor the writing is in that series, but it did give us quite a few instances of Goku acting up. First, the big one, Goku's role in sparking the Tournament of Power. In Super, he pushes Zeno, the literal god of the multiverse, to hold a tournament where losing universes get erased. Gone. Poof. Entire realities wiped out. Goku's motive? He really wants to fight the strongest guys. It's peak Goku. He's so obsessed with testing his limits that he risks universal destruction just for a good scrap. Now, to be fair, Zeno was already planning to erase these universes, and Goku's tournament gives them a fighting chance, but he didn't know any of that beforehand. He purposefully ignored the warnings of Beerus and pressed the issue as much as he could. Then there's letting Frieza live. After the Tournament of Power, Goku revives Frieza as a reward for his help, despite Frieza being, a genocidal tyrant who killed his friends, blew up planets, etc. Just like how he let Piccolo and Vegeta go years prior, but with one very important caveat. Frieza already got a second chance. Goku tried to let him live on Namek, and he immediately wasted it. Then, when he was miraculously able to survive that and turn into a cyborg, he immediately headed to Earth to destroy it. And after that, when he was revived again, time to try and blow up Earth again. No one has been given more chances than Frieza to turn over a new leaf, and every time he squanders them. Even after the events of the Broly movie, where Frieza very obviously tried to kill Goku and Vegeta along with the rest of Earth, Goku still let him live on. At what point does this cross over from nobility to mental disability? Finally, there's his interaction with Beerus in the Galactic Patrol Prisoner Saga. Beerus, an angelic being training Goku, talks to him about justice, protecting the innocent, upholding order. Goku, who's in his 50s at this point, acts like this is a brand new concept. He's like, huh? Justice? Sounds cool. And we're all left scratching our heads. Surely with all of the villains he's defeated, at least once he's thought about stopping them because it's the right thing to do. But no, this really was the confirmation we needed that Goku's morality is a completely non-traditional one, and something else drives him. So, I've made you wait long enough. What is Goku's moral philosophy? It's clearly not a deontological moral framework, or a morality built around immutable rules and principles to follow. This is the sort of thing we see in a lot of Western superheroes. Killing is wrong. Protect the innocent. Never support an evil person or cause. Stipulations like that. Goku's decisions are far too varied, ebbing and flowing with individual circumstance. He'll kill or spare an enemy depending on a lot of factors, not any strict moral code. So perhaps he's a utilitarian, a different framework where the morality of an action is determined entirely based on the outcome it causes. Killing this bad guy will cause one death, but prevent hundreds of deaths. Therefore, killing this bad guy is a good and moral action. Utilitarian characters like the Punisher often clash with deontological heroes with specific ideas of right and wrong. But Goku doesn't fall into this category either. He doesn't have specific rules, but his actions also seem to risk a greater negative effect than positive. Letting Vegeta or Frieza live wasn't a gamble. It was pretty apparent that the both of them had no intention of changing for the better, and that more innocent lives would end if Goku spared them. So, if you're only familiar with these two moral frameworks, Goku comes off pretty amoral, selfish, self-interested, and apathetic to the worries of others. But that's because these are both Western systems of morality. Goku's belief system comes from the East. That's why they call it a journey to the West. Okay, stupid wordplay aside, if you weren't aware, Goku is based on Sun Wukong, one of the primary protagonists of the 16th century Chinese novel Journey to the West. Wukong, the Monkey King, is a magical being born from a stone egg who spends his early days studying Taoism and gaining immense strength and magical powers, constantly using them to goof around and cause chaos for gods and spirits, until he's eventually punished and forced to become the bodyguard for a monk named Tripitaka, who's carrying the message of Buddhism to the far west. Wukong begins as a feral, mischievous little shit who nearly destroys heaven and is constantly picking fights with celestial beings for fun, but by the end of his journey, he achieves Buddhist enlightenment along with the rest of his crew. He learns humility, loyalty, and compassion, but never stops loving a good fight. And here we have our answer. Goku's morality is based on the development of the Monkey King. He follows a Taoist and Buddhist philosophy. First, a lot of Goku's actions make more sense if you view them through the lens of Taoism, the philosophy that emphasizes harmony with the natural flow of the universe. In Taoism, the highest virtue is not forcing your will on the world, but moving with it. It's about being in tune with your inner nature, Wu Wei, or effortless action. Goku embodies this. He doesn't strategize, he doesn't manipulate, he doesn't carry the burdens of the world. He lives moment to moment, guided by instinct, curiosity, and clarity of purpose. The reason justice is a foreign concept to him is because it hinges on the ideal of one force imposing its will on another, the good stamping out the bad. To follow this as a strict rule in all situations is antithetical to the core ideals of the Tao. This is why Goku doesn't panic when the universe is at stake. He doesn't calculate, he trusts that things will unfold as they are meant to, as long as he gives everything he has in the moment. This total trust in the natural course of the universe is exactly why Goku almost never stresses over the consequences of actions. Goku is always in flow, even when that looks reckless to others. But of course, there's also a Buddhist layer to Goku's worldview. Buddhism teaches the importance of non-attachment, the idea that clinging too tightly to things, people, or outcomes causes suffering. And while Goku clearly loves his friends and family, he also lets go very easily. He doesn't grieve for long, he doesn't hold grudges, he accepts death. He even lets himself stay dead for years at a time if he thinks it's better for the world. It's not coldness, it's detachment. He doesn't see death as the end, but just another phase in the journey. He also sees suffering as a path to growth. Every major enemy he faces becomes a kind of teacher to him. Think about it, he thanks his enemies. He smiles while bleeding. He delights in the chance to grow through hardship. That's straight out of the Buddhist idea that pain and struggling are part of the path to enlightenment. Of course, he believes Gohan will be fine without him. He loves his son, but doesn't want him to be too attached to his father, when they'll see each other again in the afterlife. He doesn't stress that his son is experiencing terrible battles because that suffering is the natural course of things and will lead to tremendous growth in the future. In the journey to the West, Sun Wukong started out the story by studying Taoist principles which made him incredibly powerful but unruly. It was after learning Buddhist principles that he reached enlightenment. His incredible powers were focused through a lens of detachment that made him more content, less selfish, and a better person. It was a very common belief in Ming Dynasty China that Buddhism and Taoism were complementary belief systems, and this is clearly depicted in Journey. And this seems to be a direct reflection of Goku's spiritual awakening after accepting his Saiyan heritage at the beginning of the Frieza saga. His Saiyan physiology offers him great power in Zenkai boosts and the mighty Ozaru, but it's an unruly power, and was originally repressed by a rigid class system that Vegeta represented. Learning more about his physiology, Goku applied his earthly wisdom and martial arts knowledge so he could take advantage of the Zenkai boosts and train in up to 100 times gravity in the short 7 days it took to fly to Namek. He accepted the two halves of himself. He is a Saiyan raised on Earth, just like Wukong learned from both the Tao and the Buddha. And afterwards, Goku became enlightened. He literally develops telepathy, reading Krillin's mind when he gets there. Not to mention his ascension to a higher form of power, represented by the Super Saiyan transformation, a Saiyan power unlocked by a pure human heart. It's not that Goku is bad or immoral, he has a very clear sense of morality. It's just not a traditional Western morality. Hell, it's not even that traditional in terms of Eastern morality, but it's very consistent and well thought out. He is a spiritual warrior, a martial artist with a monkey's soul and a god's power. He doesn't protect people because it's his duty, he does it because he values life. He doesn't raise his son to be normal, he raises him to find his own path, even if it's a hard one. He's not here to teach us how to be better citizens or anything, he's here to teach us how to be free. He lives fully, he fights joyfully, he learns constantly, and he grows without limit. Goku's moral philosophy isn't about being a hero, it's about letting go of control. It's about detachment from worldly things. It's about being yourself, completely, honestly, and without fear. Stay frosty.